Power rating equals the total stat points of all 6 attributes multiplied by the ascension of their destiny, calculated as temporary destiny times permanent destiny times tier. It categorizes people based on potential danger rather than absolute power, since abilities influence battle outcomes. Ranks range from unranked for less than 1,000 total stat points to X for above 1 trillion. This scale excludes the power of demigods. Super's power mainly derives from power rating and ability, with abilities divided into Omega, Alpha, and Beta depending on their scaling with power rating. In the sewers, Kelvin ran with his heart pounding as the damp air rushed past him. Knowing the sewers well, he navigated shortcuts, dead ends, and dangerous sections to evade pursuers. His eyes adapted to low light from mosses, and his speed kept him ahead. He knew the Justice League members chasing him possessed extraordinary abilities, as they had found his father's lair, breached its defenses, and killed him. Many of his siblings had already been killed, and now they hunted him. Despite his soldier training and endurance, exhaustion set in after hours of running. He encouraged himself that the access point to the city's edge was near, which would allow him to surface outside the city walls and enter the radiation zone. The radiation should scramble tracking methods, enabling his escape if the protective pack there remained intact. Suddenly, footsteps behind him grew louder and closer, signaling his pursuers were gaining fast. Panic surged, his heart skipped beats and then stopped, causing chest pain and immobilizing adrenaline. Then his heart resumed beating, triggering a painful awakening as hidden potential erupted within him. His vision shook, limbs trembled, and bones broke through muscles and skin, blood spilling as he endured excruciating pain. Seconds later, the pain ceased, and he emerged transformed with heightened awareness of his new capabilities. Examining his hand, he found his fingers split into 2 sets of 5, fusing the first 8 into one hardened bone sheet resembling a hoof without pain. Confirming his transformation, he stripped off his clothes, changed his legs into bird claws for silent steps, and camouflaged his skin to match the sewer walls. He stopped breathing and his heart voluntarily, lowered body heat by dilating veins, flattened himself against the wall, and waited. A female Justice League member appeared in the adjacent tunnel, searching the ground for signs of him. After some time, she noticed his disappearance and paused to examine her surroundings. Kelvin silently observed her while accumulating power. When her back was turned, he struck with unprecedented speed, concentrating muscle mass in his legs for a burst of velocity and morphing one emaciated arm into a bone spear. Kelvin drove his bone spear arm into the superhuman's flesh. The spear, as hard as his teeth, pierced her skin, entered her body, grew spiky roots, tore her from the inside out, and shredded her abdomen as it passed through. Despite the grievous wound, she spread her wings to gain distance, but Kelvin's arm remained embedded in her. He morphed his mouth into an enormous jaw and bit down on her neck. She fought back with immense strength, slamming her steel arms into his head with enough force to break walls. In retaliation, Kelvin sacrificed his lower limb to grow 2 more bone limbs, which he used to pierce her shoulders. He held onto her with his other 2 hands and tore her wings from behind. He ripped her to bits, continuing the attack as the roots of the bone spear grew within her. When he tried to snap her head in his jaws to end her misery, she spoke through blood choking her lungs and throat, declaring he would not get away with this. Kelvin ignored her, believing his victory justified his actions. He expressed disbelief at winning and looked down at his altered body, noting the different shapes and sizes of his arms and legs and the terrible gashes covering him, though he felt no pain. Instead of revulsion, he felt pride for defeating and killing a superhuman. He recognized the victory came at a cost. She had nearly crushed him despite her disadvantage, and healing would require massive energy. The energy spent on shapeshifting and healing made a quick recovery impossible and threatened his escape from pursuers. He turned his eyes to the shattered remains of the superhuman and decided to eat her without hesitation. He had eaten humans before during training with his siblings under their father's starvation regimen, although those times were difficult due to competition and scarce flesh. Now, he ate as much as possible, restoring his energy and time to continue his escape. He healed himself and reshaped the bone structure and musculature of his legs to mirror a feline's, gaining a sustainable speed boost for his flight. Kelvin managed to escape the hunt for all the children of the Patriarch and returned to the city, entering through the front gate without issues. He visited the radiation zone outside the city to change his appearance, using his abilities to find a place to stay. He killed the previous apartment owner to secure shelter, food, and peace, a small price compared to what he had paid to his father. Now free from pursuit, he looked out his window at the city below and enjoyed the sunlight on his face. New London was a megacity filled with skyscrapers averaging 100 floors, with vehicles moving on the ground and in the sky, and people flying without tools like jetpacks. The city was loud and bright, but Kelvin savored these sensations. He rarely came to the surface, mostly only during schemes with his siblings for their father, so he had never truly appreciated the city's beauty or experienced it without fear of authorities in groups like the Justice League. Now free, he admired his new body. In his natural form, he was pale white with veins visible beneath his skin. His height remained 1.7 meters, but his hair had turned white and his eyes gray, effects of awakening as a shapeshifter. Kelvin awakened the ability called malleable anatomy, which allowed him to make organic and temporary changes to his body at the cost of energy to shift and maintain the alterations. He discovered this through his destiny report, which anyone could access by relaxing, closing their eyes, and picturing the Tower of Destiny. As he prepared to do so, a news article article on the television caught his attention when he heard the word patriarch, the title of his father. A handsome, bearded middle-aged news anchor reported that the patriarch had been killed, describing him as one. The anchor explained that the patriarch's lair had been discovered beneath New London and raided successfully by the Justice League, with his followers being apprehended for rehabilitation. A field reporter then connected to the superhero in charge of the operation. The screen showed a woman in red battle armor with fiery hair and red features speaking with a deep, commanding voice. She confirmed that she had killed the patriarch and assured viewers of his death. When asked about the brainwashed children under his control, she stated they were trying to recover and treat them but faced resistance that led to losses on both sides. The interviewer questioned if she had killed any children, to which she replied that they attempted peaceful capture, but some escaped, causing altercations that resulted in casualties among her subordinates and the children. When pressed about the number of children lost, she declared that they were criminals responsible for over 1 million deaths from a neurotoxic gas attack, refusing to sacrifice her men for them. The interview was abruptly cut off. The broadcast returned to the news anchor, who expressed hope that the superhero Fire Rose was merely stressed and praised the Justice League's efforts. He offered amnesty and rehabilitation to any of the patriarch's followers on the run and introduced Annalise Thorin to discuss the potential power vacuum among villains. Kelvin lost interest, indifferent to his father's death, recalling his father's belief that only the strongest deserved to live. He doubted the news since it was not the first time his father's death had been claimed. What mattered most to Kelvin was that he was alive and that the flesh bomb his father had implanted in his neck had deactivated upon his father's death. He rejected the rehabilitation offered to him and his siblings, viewing their harsh training and losses as necessary sacrifices to become stronger, following his father's teachings that the ends justified the means. He shook off these thoughts and refocused on his destiny report. Closing his eyes, he concentrated until a bright light appeared, growing into a towering structure that filled his vision and revealed its particle composition. The report displayed his name as Kelvin Thorne, with full health, stamina, and focus at class physique, tier 0, level 0, base attributes all at 10, 0 kill count, and this was the threshold to entering the Tower of Destiny, and with a bit more focus, he would step inside. Kelvin understood that the Tower of Destiny existed everywhere, as both a physical and mental location accessible to anyone who had awakened. According to the history he knew, the tower had appeared nearly 100 years ago, changing the world by allowing people to awaken abilities, participate in destiny games, encounter otherworlders, and even achieve eternal love by reaching the top lore. Unlike his father, who had lofty goals of remaking the world, Kelvin desired only eternal life and was unafraid of the deadly destiny games despite being just 17. He chose to cross the threshold of concentration and found himself standing in a vast white space without sky or ground, surrounded by whiteness. He commanded the appearance of numerous screens showing increasing events, but when after some thought, he instructed the screen to show his patriarch's last fight. The display changed to an arena where gladiators fought, and Kelvin identified his father by his towering height and obsidian black skin visible through his armor. Kelvin expanded the screen until it filled the white space, making him a giant overlooking the three-dimensional arena. He focused on the fight, watching his father win by killing or forcing the surrender of opponents. Knowing that death in the Destiny games was not absolute unless too much destiny was lost, Kelvin resolved to learn more about the games and accept his own destiny too. He knew that every awakened person had to participate in the games once a month for 100 fights, surviving all to achieve eternal life or face death along the way. To gain more information, he willed himself back to the real world, causing the platform beneath him to vanish and falling back into the room he had borrowed. After recovering from the abrupt transition, Kelvin sought information using methods he was familiar with, lectures, books, and movies, but also decided to use the internet despite his father's ban. He retrieved a locked phone from the corpse stored in the fridge, copied the fingerprints after delicate work, and gained access to the internet. He commanded the phone to reveal its secrets, and although overwhelmed by the abundance of information and his inexperience, he eventually narrowed down details about the Tower of Destiny, the games, necessary commands and tools, and most importantly, the power system. He learned that the Destiny games involved two kinds of destiny, permanent and temporary. Temporary destiny increased attributes and came from fans and supporters, while permanent destiny, tied to the kill count, was gained by killing other participants. Both combined multiplicatively to enhance attributes. Kelvin also noted the importance of game points for expanding awakened abilities, as well as win streaks and achievements. The article detailed the various aspects of the Destiny games, including play styles and fan counts of notable participants. Kelvin discovered that his father appeared on the list of exceptional climbers. Despite being labeled a villain, the Patriarch had many supporters who admired his violent playstyle, which made him strong and able to create larger spectacles that attracted more fans. Kelvin learned that many chose to become heroes to gain reputation and support both inside and outside the games, improving their chances of survival. He reflected on this, recalling his father's words that everyone is ultimately self-serving. He also found that gaining acclaim could come from becoming a villain and defeating heroes, though it was less sustainable and offered smaller returns unless accompanied by spectacular feats. Becoming a star in entertainment was another route to acquiring fans and increasing temporary destiny, which combined with kill count could make a participant formidable. The article was hosted on a wiki wiki with detailed information about the Destiny games. Kelvin studied the material while snacking on the corpse stored in his fridge, following his father's advice not to waste food. He lacked cooking skills and preferred to consume the available food rather than waste it, influenced by past hardships. Kelvin spent his days napping, reading, watching fights, exercising, and eating. Although food and exercise no longer affected his awakened body, he exercised to maintain mental sharpness and bodily coordination. He heard news of a monster incursion resisted by heroes but remained indifferent, doing as he pleased. This freedom contrasted with the control his father had exerted over him, bringing a new sense of contentment. When the time came for his first Destiny game, Kelvin chose to enter the tower of his own volition. He appeared in the white world before a bowl containing numbered balls, from which he was to pick 10. He knew the numbers would determine the game he would participate in and that failing to choose would result in a random selection. He dismissed the importance of the choice, aware of the Destiny theory of Raven that suggested free will was an illusion and matches were preordained, though outcomes could be influenced by strength. Despite this, Kelvin picked the balls because he valued freedom. Each ball hovered as he selected all 10, forming a line of numbers whose meaning was unknown but identified his game and competitors. He waited for the game to start, declining to watch others' matches to focus on his own. Participants arrived in the Tower of Destiny one by one, drawn into the match regardless of their location or condition, bringing whatever possessions they had. Anyone could access the Tower of Destiny with their mind at any time and watch others' games, both present and past, but when it was time to fight for their lives, both body and mind would enter the tower. He observed as the balls began to spin around each other, growing so fast they became indistinguishable before fusing and exploding in a flash of light and sound. The flash disoriented him and caused him to swoon. When he recovered, he found himself on a basketball court. 10 people stood on the court, 5 on each half, with 6 spectators seated in the bleachers. A screen appeared, displaying the game title, objective, and rules. The match would start in 5 minutes. 2 teams of 5 would fight using any means possible, and the game would end after 10 minutes or when only 5 people remained. A loud alarm echoed through the hall as a timer appeared above their heads, counting down from 5 minutes, accompanied by a basketball materializing in front of each participant. Kelvin read the rules, examined his competitors and teammates for weaknesses in posture, fidgeting, and expressions, noting they looked like easy prey. He thought darkly about managing a beating. The oldest participant, a blonde and confident woman named Elena, suggested they huddle and plan. Kelvin joined the group as Elena introduced herself as a level 3 player with some experience and proposed a survival strategy. Another woman challenged Elena to reveal her ability, stating she would only follow the strong. Elena admitted she was a speedster. Elena explained that levels 1 to 10 were meant to be easy games and survival was possible with effort and luck, recommending they share abilities to plan better. Kelvin listened but disagreed with the survival plan, aiming instead for achievements to increase his game rating and power, knowing that survival alone was insufficient for his goals. Kelvin refused to settle for mere survival and recognized Elena as someone aiming for more, marking them as enemies and a significant threat if her ability was genuine. When it was his turn to introduce himself and his ability, he stated his name as Augustus. A girl who claimed to follow only the strong snickered at his name. Kelvin stepped close to her face, causing her to step back in fear. Interpreting her reaction as surrender, he snorted and revealed his ability as super strength. Elena questioned his appearance, and he curtly replied that looks could be deceiving. She shrugged and moved on without pressing further. As the timer counted down, Kelvin and his team formed a strategy while the opposing team also prepared, each holding their dodgeballs. When the game began, Kelvin transformed his arms into large bone blades and swung them horizontally in a circle, slicing through his teammates and killing 3. Elena dodged thanks to her speed and distanced herself, staring at him in horror along with others. She shrieked, questioning what he had done. Kelvin spat out a piece of flesh and declared that they were not the same, attempting a catchphrase. Elena lunged at him with a punch he didn't see coming, striking his face and cracking his jaw. Kelvin swung his bladed arms, nicking her face and shattering her arm. Blood streamed down her face as she howled in pain. Kelvin spat out teeth and felt no pain as his broken jaw healed. He commented that if he had been quicker, he might have sliced her head in half but accepted the outcome, wishing she had kicked instead of punched. The opponents were shocked to see Kelvin and Elena fighting each other instead of using balls. Their shock turned to dread as Kelvin's body grew a bony armor, preparing for battle. The boy who had been crying collapsed and called out for his mother. When Kelvin stepped toward them, one opponent dropped his ball and fled, leaving his weapon behind. Kelvin advanced, but the boy was struck by the ball, releasing mucus like slime and triggering the notification, "End of game." Kelvin looked at Elena instead of the ball that hit the boy. He noticed her pick up a ball with one hand and throw it at another person, eliminating 2 opponents and leaving only 5 people standing, which met one of the requirements to end the game. Elena exhaled in relief and said there would be no more killing. Kelvin tried to grind his teeth in frustration but could not because his teeth had merged into they. He reversed the changes to his body before speaking. He told her he did not like her at all. Elena shouted back that she did not like him either and that no one had to die because it was just a game of dodgeball. Kelvin asked if she was stupid for wondering why he would want to kill in a Destiny game, saying it should be obvious. Elena insisted he did not need to kill. Kelvin replied that all he required was the desire to kill. Elena Elena realized he was a villain and said she solemnly promised to vanquish him for the crimes he had committed. Kelvin rolled his eyes, muttering that he should have seen this coming. Elena declared they were archenemies from that day on and vowed to eliminate him at every chance, warning he should hope not to meet her in future games or back on Earth. Kelvin was frustrated that he had failed to kill her but did not care about her vow. The remaining participants and spectators began to disappear, and the arena dissolved into nothingness, signaling the end of the game. Kelvin found himself back in his white space, where words blurred and arranged themselves into a game evaluation. The evaluation showed a difficulty rating of F, achievements including first hit, first elimination, highest kill count, kill streak, and survive, totaling 6 points and 6 game points. Kelvin smiled, almost forgetting that he could have had more points if Elena had not stopped him from killing or if the boy had not been hit by the ball. He noted that 6 points were practically the value of 6 games in the amateur league, putting him ahead of others who survived 5 games with only 1 point each. This advantage would allow him to acquire a new ability to enhance his shapeshifting sooner, increasing his chances of surviving all 100 games. Kelvin called up his destiny report, which showed his name as Kelvin Thorne, health at 25300, stamina at 3300, focus at 5300, classes physique tier 0, amateur league level 1, strength 30, constitution 30, endurance 30, vitality 30, speed 30, mind 30, kill count 3, fans 0, game points 6, and ability shapeshifting alpha with malleable anatomy. The kill count increased his power by 3 times, boosting all his attributes, health, focus, and stamina. Improved stamina provided more physical energy to use his abilities, and increased focus gave more mental resources to activate, control, and maintain his abilities. As a physique class, stamina was most important, but focus was also critical for full body modifications like the bone armor. A larger health pool made healing easier and reduced the risk of being one-shot, which was helpful against poison since he could not heal from that indefinitely. Kelvin smirked, thinking Elena was stupid for asking why he killed them, and affirmed that becoming stronger made his decision worth it. He acknowledged that the people he killed would lose half their kill count or half their total attributes if they had none, and they would die if their total attributes dropped to 30 in the amateur league. What mattered to him was that he had become stronger and ensured their sacrifice was not in vain. He reiterated that there was no good or evil, only life and death. Having experienced many near-death situations, Kelvin knew he did not want to die. He recalled his father's words that if one was not willing to do everything possible to survive, then one did not deserve to live. Kelvin wanted to live and would do everything he could to survive, as it had been his whole life and was common sense to him. He thought she was stupid but acknowledged her strength and potential. He still felt the ache in his jaws from her strike, which had prompted him to wear bone armor to increase his defense after discovering she relied solely on. He recognized these as weaknesses she could fix with game points but noted she was content with mere survival and mild exceptionality. He compared her to the heroes his father hated, who were hypocrites concerned with morals only when well-fed, but who would resort to cannibalism for survival when hungry. He agreed with that but did not hate heroes, only found them annoying and saw her wasted potential as an eyesore. He believed she could have done better than him, given her speed, and could have killed 5 people before anyone reacted. He rubbed his jaws and said it was not to have an arch-rival but to increase his publicity, thinking that if she became a big hero and he defeated her, his fame would grow. He decided to search for more information about speedsters, interested in her weaknesses and his own to avoid being caught off guard. Returning to the real world, he found himself sitting in the same chair as before the game, with no injuries thanks to the tower's complete healing. He noted that others he maimed in the game would only be half-healed and require immediate medical assistance. He called out the name Augustus and decided to keep it. Holding a borrowed phone, he unlocked it with a borrowed fingerprint and researched speedsters online. He found speedsters divided into 2 types: physique class, like himself, relying on their bodies to run quickly with evolving bodies becoming stronger with better nerves, muscles, blood distribution, and perception, and mental class, relying on their minds for speed, sometimes manifesting as a force field that grants speed without affecting. He learned physique speedsters depended on stamina and were vulnerable to leg injuries, while mental speedsters were less affected by stamina and leg injuries but had weak bodies easily injured or killed if caught unawares, and were vulnerable to null-class supers. Physique speedsters were immune to nullification. He wondered where to find a null to help him and whether he even wanted one, as his active ability might make him vulnerable. He grumbled over Elena's difficulty to kill, then searched online for Elena Goldlight, finding her face as the top result and chuckling evilly. He clicked her social media account and found she was a mental class speedster who had awakened 4 months ago and was familiar with the games because her parents were heroes. The Goldlight family was a famous hero family with D-rank parents who had tens of thousands of fans, lived in a large mansion, were wealthy, and were celebrities in their city as its. He noted that Elena had powerful parents who would protect her from harm and that she lived on another continent, making it difficult for him to reach her even if he had the power to. He considered hiring villains to kill her but realized it would require money, which he lacked, and it would be expensive due to her parents' protection. He thought about taking villainy jobs to earn money and gain publicity but recognized the risks involved. His attention was drawn to a news article trending on the internet titled "Rampaging Demigods." He clicked on the link and watched a blurry video showing 2 colossal figures fighting, accompanied by sound sounds of explosions and thunderclaps. The camera panned to reveal cracks spreading across the ground and a third fighter taking a beating. A large flying boulder slammed into the camera, ending the video. He read the article, which speculated about the demigods' identities and reasons for fighting, noting he wondered what could make such powerful figures fight, but returned to his concerns about eliminating his archenemy and acquiring money. His gaze shifted to a golden ring on the table in the center of the room. He fixated on the ring, calling it the most beautiful thing in existence, and resolved to possess it. As he reached for it, the ring glowed brightly, sparking electricity that repelled his hand. Undeterred, he tried again, enduring shocks that charred his fingers but failed to lift the heavy ring. A whisper echoed in his mind, asking if he wanted the ring, power, and two. He answered yes to all without hesitation. The voice demanded he swear to kill Raijin, and he agreed without question. Upon swearing, the ring lifted from the table, and he slid it onto his finger despite his hands turning to darkened bones. His body tingled pleasantly, then began to heat and steam, but he remained unaware, too absorbed in the ring. This marked his second awakening, an abnormal event accompanied by unusual manifestations. Humans, beasts, and otherworlders have the potential to awaken only once, but certain items can reshape destiny and allow a second awakening. Information about these items is known to less than 0.01% of Earth 11s. These items' potential is evident even to the most ignorant beings who feel compelled to acquire them. Kelvin acquired the Ring of the Paragon. Its benefits were instantaneous. His body heated until the ring melted into a thin gold film that covered him, then cooled and hardened into a golden statue with a wide grin. His mind and body froze until the gold film was absorbed by his cells, completing his metamorphosis. His skin, eyes, hair, and teeth turned black, and a large golden tattoo of a spiked ring appeared on his right chest, with golden lines extending over his face and hair, penetrating deep into his muscles, bones, teeth, tongue, mind, and soul. Kelvin remained unconscious after his body thawed and collapsed to the ground. In his vivid dream, he knew he was Icon 73 years earlier, having just become Earth 11's first demigod. Supported by the remaining humans after the apocalypse, Icon reached the 100th floor of the Tower of Destiny to repay their faith. On the 100th floor, Icon saw others observing him through a tear in space. They were tall beings whose immense presence he felt despite their physical absence. One introduced himself as Odin, the All-Father from Earth 1, followed by Zeus, Jupiter, Ammoniusare, Baal, Amaterasu, Tian, Votan, Indra, and Coloring. Icon ignored their names. Odin told Icon that he had reached a great crossroads and that the people of Earth 11 had faith in him, granting him the power to decide their world's fate. Odin recommended a course of action, but Icon interrupted, declaring his mission was to cut off Yggdrasil and free Earth 11. The God Kings showed displeasure silently, especially Zeus, who crackled with lightning. Icon ignored them and approached the Weave of Destiny, a large ball of silver threads representing the destinies of all people. He reached out to touch it, but it remained intact. Odin explained that the weave could not be destroyed easily and required a divine fire, which only something of great power could create. Icon asked where to obtain divine fire. Odin said that Icon possessed a divine spark that could create it, but warned that the process would cost Icon his life. Icon examined his chest and noticed it was hollow, lacking lungs, esophagus, trachea, larynx, and heart, replaced instead by a golden spark of light and energy, the reward for becoming a demigod. He took a deep breath to steady his mind and resolved to proceed. Odin acknowledged Icon's determination and explained that creating the divine flame required more than the spark. Icon inserted his arm into his hollow chest, grasped the divine spark, and withdrew it, weakening himself but not killing him. He extended the spark toward the Weave of Destiny and received a notification requesting confirmation to create the divine flame, warning that it required sacrificing all ties of karma and 10% of mortal lives as tinder. Shocked and angry, Icon questioned the meaning of the demand, expressing frustration over the additional sacrifices. Zeus mocked Icon's hesitation, suggesting that one more sacrifice was trivial. Odin explained that aligning Earth 11 with Yggdrasil had granted Icon his power, but if Icon resisted, he must pay the price in blood by sacrificing his gained power and the destinies of those who supported him. Icon considered the cost, especially the lives of those who helped him, including his pregnant wife who would die along with their unborn child, leaving their son orphaned and vulnerable. He doubted trusting others to care for his son and refused to accept that outcome. Consequently, Icon withdrew his hand and returned the divine spark to his chest. Odin then directed Icon to fuse with the Weave of Destiny to gain control over Earth's destiny and create a pantheon for Earth 11, hinting at the possibility of becoming a god king. Icon grasped the silver ball of threads and confirmed that this action would open Earth to Yggdrasil and continue monster incursions. Odin assured him it was a small price for power and promised safety for Icon and his loved ones. Icon fused with the Weave of Destiny and acquired immense power, feeling godlike with the ability to kill anyone on Earth 11 instantly. Despite the temptation, he chose to share the power with everyone rather than hoard it. Feeling guilty for refusing to sacrifice those he loved, Icon decided to reward all inhabitants of Earth 11 by scattering the Weave of Destiny within himself and declaring that from now on, everyone would have the ability to awaken, control their destiny, and protect themselves. After the Weave of Destiny dispersed, a god king called out to Icon, accusing him of foolishness and warning that he would regret his decision. Odin, the All-Father, expressed disappointment, criticizing Icon for prioritizing emphasizing quantity over quality and suggesting he should have created a pantheon to protect the world. Icon argued that the destiny of an entire world should not rest on the shoulders of a few, deeming it an unfair and overwhelming responsibility. He believed everyone should have power over their own destiny and felt he had repaid the world for its help. The God Kings ignored Icon, closed the window to the 100th floor, and left him alone with the remnants of the weave of destiny. Among these remnants were 6 rings of immortality, each representing the immortality of the soul, mind, knowledge, body, power, and paragon. The final ring was meant to bind them all and the destiny of the world. These rings were intended to be the foundation of godhood for the pantheon of Earth 11, but now they awaited Icon's choice before scattering into the wind for others to find. Icon could have taken all the rings but could only choose one. He bitterly laughed at the thought and felt the sting of loss. Eventually, he chose the ring of Paragon to maintain control and prevent others from using it to recover the other rings. The ring of Paragon was the weakest and granted little power, so his choice was not for immediate gain but to ensure no one could undo his decision. He told himself it was better to be safe than sorry. He took the ring of Paragon while the others scattered into the wind and then left the Tower of Destiny. The dream blurred as events unfolded too quickly for Kelvin to see clearly. It became apparent that the God Kings were right. Icon soon regretted his decision because the world rejected it. Despite his explanations, the people called him a liar due to the ongoing monster incursions and the dangerous destiny games everyone had to participate in. Matters worsened when powerful beings from other versions of Earth invaded, killing many, sinking a continent, and cracking others. Icon was labeled a villain and deceiver. The Justice League, created by someone named Raijin, hunted him and his family for years, killing his wife, children, and anyone who tried to help him before finally killing Icon himself. Kelvin woke up with unfocused eyes, muttering that his father had been right. One either dies young or lives long enough to become the villain. He believed there was no right or wrong in the matter. Icon did his best, but it was never enough to satisfy everyone. Icon was destined to be a villain either way, yet he used his power to empower those who would accuse him of evil. Kelvin agreed with the God Kings, believing Icon to be foolish, naive, and inefficient in his decisions. A voice interrupted his thoughts, stating that he had accepted the legacy of the first Paragon. Kelvin stood quickly, looked around warily, and asked who was there. A shadowy figure, a dark phantom like a wraith of indeterminate gender, appeared. Kelvin asked who it was. The figure identified itself as the voice of the ring, the spirit of the artifact. This reminded Kelvin of what he had been doing before the dream, and he noticed changes to his body. The shadow told Kelvin that the ring had fused with him and would not separate until his death. Kelvin, suspicious, asked how an artifact spirit could speak, as he had never heard of such a thing. The shadow explained that normal objects could not speak, but it was a divine object with a will, capable of choosing its wielder and communicating if conditions were right. Kelvin doubted this and searched his phone for information about divine spirits. The spirit floated over, observed his search, and said that searching the web would not help because divine artifacts were rare and not documented, mentioning Jonah as an example. The spirit passed through Kelvin's body to look at his phone screen, which startled him, but he kept his distance and continued searching. Kelvin found no information about divine spirits, divine artifacts, or the God Kings from his dream and gave up in frustration. The shadow pointed out the lack of evidence, but Kelvin insisted that absence of evidence was not evidence of absence. The spirit asked what he would do next, and Kelvin demanded proof of its authenticity. The spirit said it could not prove itself but recounted observing Kelvin's first Destiny game, noting that his performance met its requirements, which led it to choose him as wielder. It described how Kelvin had tried to lift the ring, sworn to kill Raijin, had the dream, and now questioned its authenticity. Kelvin considered this suspiciously. The spirit acknowledged Kelvin's caution but insisted they needed to move forward since the ring was fused with him until death. Kelvin accused the spirit of sounding like an imposter, and the shadow groaned, then suggested going outside to test if others could see it. Kelvin refused, saying that would only prove his own sanity or the spirit's ability to hide, not its identity. The spirit gave up on instant trust and said Kelvin would have to learn to trust it over time. Kelvin asked how the spirit had found him. The spirit said it had jumped through space because it was a divine artifact and told Kelvin to check his body and destiny report for unnatural abilities. Kelvin suspected the spirit wanted to possess him, but it moved to a cup and said it could not touch or harm anything. Kelvin doubted this but noticed he had awakened twice and gained a new shape-shifting ability, which made him start to believe the spirit. He asked why the spirit chose him. The spirit said it needed someone with an ability capable of growth, and Kelvin's flexibility and change made him the best candidate. The spirit said it only communicated with him because he had agreed to kill Raijin. Refusal would have made it leave. Kelvin noted there were other shapeshifters, but the spirit said few were as powerful or. Kelvin felt complimented but then asked if the spirit had influenced his mind. The spirit denied this, saying his impulse to acquire the ring was his own, like basic needs amplified because his entire body desired it. Kelvin agreed to believe the spirit for now but warned it was on thin ice. The shadow expressed impatience and asked to do something productive. Kelvin asked the spirit a series of questions about the dream and its legacy, inquiring if he was the only one who had acquired the spirit since Icon and why others had died. The spirit explained that the dream was a legacy left by Icon, the first paragon and demigod, who sacrificed his remaining life to set criteria for selecting paragons. Kelvin expressed surprise at the sacrifice, and the spirit confirmed Icon was already dying. The spirit clarified that Icon's actions ended societal divides between the awakened and unawakened. Kelvin remained skeptical of Icon's legacy, but the spirit continued, explaining the legacy revealed the true history of the world and justified killing Raijin to prevent moral conflicts for his successors. Kelvin listened without voicing his own motives. The spirit said Kelvin was not the only paragon since Icon. Many others had died either by accident or because enemies sought the spirit. Kelvin questioned why he had never heard of the Ring of Paragon or its wielders. The spirit said previous wielders kept their identities secret to survive. When Kelvin asked for their names, the spirit provided them but warned no information would be found online. Kelvin searched online and found nothing, then decided to check records at the Tower of Destiny. At the tower, he found extensive information about the previous wielders, including videos of their matches and details about their golden tattoos shaped like a spiked ring with lines extending over their bodies. Satisfied he was not imagining things, Kelvin felt fear upon learning of their powers. Returning to the real world, he asked how invincible wielders could be killed. The spirit explained they could be suffocated, as their mortality remained despite powers. The spirit recounted how one teleporter was cursed, an invisible woman poisoned, and a powerful telekinetic crushed by a demigod. Kelvin muttered that he was doomed. The spirit reassured him he had a good chance because he could hide his identity and change his appearance, unlike previous wielders identifiable by tattoos. Encouraged, Kelvin nodded, and the spirit asked about his second ability. Before Kelvin could reply, the shadow chuckled and revealed that the paragon with invincibility had been its second wielder, and it had made. The shadow asked if it had made a mistake with Kelvin. Kelvin responded with pride that he had power shifting. The shadow exclaimed that it was a good ability and expected it since Kelvin's first ability was shapeshifting, then asked about its requirements. Kelvin considered and said it involved stealing the destiny of others. The shadow became excited, stating it was a great ability that would become formidable with opportunity to grow. Kelvin said he planned to get a job to earn money, grow his ability, and build his reputation. The shadow agreed but warned that as a villain, reputation would matter little compared to kill count. Kelvin acknowledged this but said it couldn't hurt. The shadow agreed. Kelvin left his borrowed apartment after changing his appearance and noted his tattoos had disappeared. He wore a hoodie and the shadow followed him. Entering the elevator, Kelvin asked the shadow its name. The shadow said it was Wrath of Icon, but could be called Wrath. Kelvin hoped they could do great things together. Though Kelvin did not trust Wrath, he decided to proceed cautiously. Wrath confidently said escaping its prison was not a waste of time. Kelvin asked about the prison. Wrath explained that demigods had captured its last wielder and sealed him in a prison designed to trap Wrath. The wielder died but Wrath had not escaped immediately, letting them think they had captured it. Wrath said the demigods were probably fighting over it now, thinking one had stolen it. Kelvin asked how soon Wrath had escaped. Wrath said immediately after Kelvin's game. Kelvin recalled the video of fighting demigods and gulped. He asked if the demigods wanted Wrath for a second ability. Wrath said no, they wanted it to fuse the other rings to create a pantheon and become gods or semblances thereof on earth. Wrath said it had a voice and strict requirements, so the demigods could not force it or imprison it. Kelvin considered and asked if acquiring the other rings would grant more power. Wrath laughed and said yes. For example, the ring of energy would grant infinite energy and endless use of abilities, making one unstoppable. Wrath warned that whoever possessed such a ring now, possibly demigods, would be very powerful. Kelvin chuckled and said he should forget about them until he became a demigod. Wrath encouraged him, mentioning a man called the Patriarch who possessed the Ring of the Soul, had been killed several times but always returned, and could only be killed permanently by a paragon. Wrath said if Kelvin killed the Patriarch and took his ring, he would become immune to death except from other divine weapons and artifacts. Kelvin was incredulous and said it was a small world. Wrath asked if Kelvin had met the Patriarch. Kelvin said sort of and asked why his predecessors had failed to get him despite his strength not matching invincibility or teleportation. Wrath explained the Patriarch was a powerful null-class super and a trapper paragons designed to capture any who pursued him, which had caught Wrath's last wielder. Kelvin chuckled. Wrath said the previous wielder had intangibility and disintegration, could move through or demolish walls, was unharmed while dealing devastating blows, and thought he was invincible and could sneak up on the Patriarch. But the Patriarch was too powerful. The wielder lost his abilities near him and was captured. Wrath smirked, saying maybe the paragon with invincibility and reflection could have taken the Patriarch, but certainly not intangibility and disintegration. Kelvin asked if demigods always watched the Patriarch. Wrath confirmed they would capture anyone who showed up to kill him. Kelvin asked if that meant a demigod was in New London. Wrath asked where that was. Kelvin said it was their current location. Wrath asked if the Patriarch was there. Kelvin replied melancholically that he had been and was killed 3 weeks ago. Wrath explained that the Patriarch would not remain dead for long, as he would soon find a body to possess, having prepared vessels for that eventuality by kidnapping and grooming children. He confirmed that a demigod should be present in New London, likely in a sealed-off part of the city, and suggested. Wrath stated that demigods were needed to prevent incursions within cities by fortifying and anchoring space. Kelvin expressed surprise at the necessity of demigods for survival. Wrath noted that conditions were better now than before demigods existed, as incursions could happen anytime and anywhere, making nowhere safe. Wrath mentioned that many people had supported Icon for peace but later resented him for forcing participation in the Destiny games, which brought more violence. Kelvin acknowledged the usefulness of having a spirit like Wrath for information, despite Wrath's lack of knowledge about current affairs or mundane details like the Council of Shareholders owning New London. Wrath believed a demigod could be found deep underground at the city's center or possibly through a special spatial machine. Kelvin learned from Wrath as they discussed further while he traveled to District 666. District 666, unofficially named after Thunderbeast, claimed the area was known as the turf of the Thunderstorm Villain League and a crime hotspot. Kelvin recalled that villains needed to join a league or create one to find jobs or build reputations, unlike goons. He had never expected to join a league, assuming he would serve his father, who could nullify powers without touching others, until Kelvin took a taxi to the district's edge, arriving in a dilapidated zone that formed a buffer between District 666 and the city proper. Behind him stood the city's towering buildings. Ahead rose even taller structures in the lawless district. District 666 buzzed with activity, mixing crime and villainy into a prosperous anarchy. Kelvin pulled up his hoodie, walked confidently without fidgeting or appearing prey, and ignored the intense scrutiny of passers-by. He passed slavers' dens, prostitution parlors, gambling alcoves, street racing corners, and fighting rings, moving deeper into the district where order governed the chaos. The district was divided into sections controlled by various gangs, enforcing rules and punishing those who stepped out of line. The most ordered area was the district's center, where the Villain League conducted official business. It resembled a normal city sector except for tattooed residents, tricked-out vehicles, and non-humans walking about. Kelvin entered the building accompanied by a beast man with a bear's head, unfazed. Kelvin relied on the assurance that the beast man would not attack him despite any anger issues, which boosted his confidence. Beast men were illegal in most human cities due to their violent tendencies and because they were descendants of otherworlders, a reason rooted in racism. Beast men considered humans uncivilized and mocked them as weak. The two regarded each other mildly before joining one of the 6 long lines servicing villains in the district's center. People chatted while waiting, sitting at tables and chairs near the walls. Someone in another line complained about having to queue despite technological advances, and another person teased him about being new to the area. The newcomer curtly refused to share his origin, joking that the other would have to buy him dinner first and that he preferred female weasels with substance. Their exchange caused loud laughter among the villains. No one explained why registration could not be done online, as villains were selfish with information and unwilling to share it freely. The complainer appeared ignorant and vulnerable to exploitation. Kelvin understood that the internet was insecure due to hackers and weapon-class supers who could easily extract data from electronics. The League used an organic network with a single person acting as the main computer and smaller terminals accessing the person, making hacking difficult and the main computer's location unknown. After waiting 32 minutes, Kelvin entered a sealed booth and completed his registration with the help of a robot, providing his face and fingerprints. The personal terminal he received made the process worthwhile. Once finished, the booth opened, and he left to a nearby restaurant to access his terminal in peace. Wrath noticed Kelvin's good mood and asked what made him happy. Kelvin replied that he was full of anticipation for the future. Wrath changed the subject, asking if Kelvin planned to join a gang. Kelvin sneered, preferring to remain independent rather than join a messy gang. Wrath pointed out the lack of backup and support, but Kelvin shrugged it off. When asked about his first mission, Kelvin said he wanted to steal an interesting ability. Wrath agreed, advising him to prioritize growing his ability over money, as strength would attract wealth. Kelvin admitted he was simply excited to try his ability. They ignored the increased glances from others, recognizing them as caution rather than hostility. At the restaurant, Kelvin and Wrath eagerly huddled over the large, brick-like terminal with a touch interactive screen. As a bona fide villain, Kelvin could access the League network through it, though some functions required special permissions or reputation. The terminal provided updates on world events, a newsreel, and a power wall ranking villains, similar to a stock exchange but focused on villain activities such as confirmed deaths and recent robberies. Kelvin accessed the terminal to acquire information about villains' abilities, noting that villains kept their powers secret unlike heroes whose abilities were available on the normal web. He considered paying for an investigation into any being through the terminal. He used the terminal mainly to hire villains or put himself up or higher as an independent, allowing him to peruse missions open to his rank. The terminal ranked villains based on power rating calculated by total stat points multiplied by the ascension of their destiny, which was temporary destiny times permanent destiny times tier. Kelvin knew the power rating ranks ranged from unranked, less than 1,000, up to X, above 1 trillion. With a total of 180 in his stats and being in tier 0, his power rating was 180, making him unranked. The League considered him unranked until he proved otherwise, so F-rank missions were available to him, but he avoided them because the gap between his power and the minimum for F-rank was too wide. He focused only on missions for the unranked. He found many missions for the unranked, more than for all other ranks combined, including missions from other leagues worldwide. He filtered to missions in New London, prioritizing prioritizing mission types over rewards, choosing missions requiring him to kill a target to steal their destinies. He further narrowed targets to other shapeshifters to improve his own abilities. Among the targets, he found a man who could turn into a minotaur, another who could become liquid, a woman who shaped her bones into weapons, and a man who could turn into gas. He noticed a target who could impersonate others by copying looks, voice, and habits. Kelvin asked Wrath how someone could copy habits. Wrath explained that the target was likely a psychic class super using illusions rather than a shapeshifter, fooling people into thinking otherwise. Kelvin acknowledged the skill, noting it could fool him into running away if the impersonation looked like a demigod. Wrath dismissed it as parlor tricks easily crushed by stronger opponents. Kelvin argued it could work if one recognized the impersonation as a demigod. Wrath doubted Kelvin would be fooled by Icon, whom he knew was dead. Kelvin conceded and moved on. He continued searching for a weak target with an ability possessing potential, narrowing down to 3 options: a man who turned his bones. The man's permanent metal bones made him stronger and more durable but did not protect vital organs. The woman's temporary metal skin required energy to maintain but made her resistant to bullets and attacks. However, she was vulnerable if caught off guard. Kelvin asked Wrath which target he should pursue first. Wrath explained that he had seen these 2 abilities before and identified them as physique-class supers with metallic body transformations, not shapeshifters. He noted that if they ascended through the Tower of Destiny, they would gain points to awaken more abilities and eventually become the same metallic being, starting from different directions, one from the inside. Wrath recommended pursuing the man with metal bones to gain a bigger boost when combined with Kelvin's shapeshifting, as metal bones would protect the brain and prevent instant death from a bullet. Kelvin agreed that the metallic bones man should be easier to kill even if caught off guard and began planning. They reviewed extensive information about the man, including notes, pictures, and videos. The man was the boss of a prostitution parlor occupying an entire floor of a skyscraper, with a bar in the front room and access to back rooms for services. They examined the floor layout, the front room, and the access points to the back rooms, as well as a video showing a path from the entrance through the first room, the hallway behind it, and the service entrance on the other side. The floor was only accessible via 2 elevators and 2 staircases on both sides of the building. One elevator was public, accessible to anyone, while the other was private for employees. The prostitution parlor occupied one of 123 floors, allowing the boss to escape to other floors to evade a chase. They identified 2 major problems: reaching the boss and escaping after killing him. Kelvin was confident he could kill the man, but the man rarely showed up or met clients. Security was tight, with supers manning both entrances, men patrolling the floor, and guards protecting the boss. Kelvin realized that even if he killed the man, survival was unlikely without either breaking through a wall. Based on the security force's strength, fighting 20 men seemed more difficult than taking the chance with the fall. The mission's high payment of $100,000 reflected these challenges. Neither Kelvin nor Wrath understood the exact value of the money, but they knew the average unranked mission reward was $20,000, with some reaching $50,000 or $120,000. Wrath speculated that either a lot of money was involved or someone hated the target. Kelvin focused on whether he could accomplish the mission, acknowledging the difficulty but expressing confidence. Wrath agreed, stating that Kelvin's shapeshifting made it doable. Wrath mentioned that having intangibility and disintegration would make it easier, allowing phasing through walls or destroying them, but those abilities were rare and their possessors hard to kill. Wrath dismissed the worries and suggested taking things as they came, proposing to activate Kelvin's ability to test its limits. Kelvin agreed, then left to research and acquire tools and materials needed for the heist, prioritizing. Upon returning home, Kelvin reviewed the information again to plan step by step and realized he could not bring a gun or any dangerous metallic objects into the establishment due to metal detectors at the entrance. 2 guards armed with guns stood at the door. Kelvin approached them, swiftly dispatched them, picked up the communicator from one guard, and informed the boss that Lady Grava was there to see him. He used a tone copied from mission videos, which fooled the boss. The boss asked what she wanted. Kelvin replied it was about a new acquisition. The boss ordered him to come in, and the door unlocked. Kelvin changed into Lady Grava's figure and the prostitute's dress before sending Wrath through the door to check for ambushes. After confirming safety, Kelvin entered the large office. The boss sat at the only table, busy with documents, looking up. The boss asked gruffly about the new acquisition. Kelvin approached with a sway of his hips, suggesting he came for fun. The boss refused, saying he was busy. Kelvin whined in a sultry voice that he missed the boss. Before the boss could respond, a needle injected anesthesia into his arm, and he slumped. Kelvin laid the boss on the ground, expressing disappointment and suspicion about the tranquilizer's strength. Wrath shrugged and said better safe than sorry. Kelvin patted the boss, searching for anything organic that might interfere with stealing his destiny. Wrath remarked that tranquilizers could bring down most unranked supers, but that Kelvin placed his palm on the boss's open chest, ensuring skin contact, and activated his ability. His eyes glowed, and hidden tattoos appeared. Golden light emitted from his eyes, nostrils, mouth, and tattoos, spreading to the boss, who began glowing with small golden runes covering his skin. The runes searched his body, found what they sought, jerked it, and pulled it to Kelvin. The runes receded, causing the boss to stop glowing and lose weight. becoming thin and weak. The light show ended after 12 seconds. Kelvin relived the boss's awakening moment with memories tugging at his mind. Wrath asked how it went. Kelvin exhaled heavily and showed 3 white bone claws emerging from his fist, bloody at first, then hardening to metallic. He swung them at the table, slicing through it cleanly. Wrath nodded in satisfaction, guessing the claws were steel. Kelvin confirmed they were bones of steel that could grow stronger, but said they had to leave soon and would discuss it later. The boss still breathed slowly after the ordeal. Kelvin severed his head from his body, took some blood, wrote something on the wall, then left the office and the establishment. No one appeared to notice anything amiss, though Lady Grava noticed the lack of guards patrolling. As the manager in charge of the prostitutes, she moved between sections to monitor things and noticed the missing guards but did not raise an alarm. Instead, she distracted others who might have noticed, including the guard in the surveillance room, though the guard only saw a loop of. Lady Grava hoped the disturbance was caused by the assassin, as she had paid too much for the operation to fail due to ineptitude. Lady Grava complained despite doing the bare minimum to avoid suspicion, knowing an investigation would follow if the assassination failed. She received a notification confirming the mission's completion and a request for her confirmation to release payment to the assassin. She remained professional, waited an hour, then searched for the boss, finding his corpse and the words "I am you but better" written on the wall. She ignored the message, looted the safe for documents and money, announced the leader's death, and began plans to. Hours later, she confirmed the target was dead. Kelvin waited in a hotel in District 666 for confirmation of his mission's success, avoiding going home to ensure he was not followed. He and Wrath talked during the wait. Kelvin said the mission was not so bad. Wrath acknowledged Kelvin's success and asked for details about his ability. Kelvin explained he could only have 9 abilities, needed to open slots with game points to steal destinies, had used his first slot, and needed 20 game points to open the second. Wrath said the cost was reasonable. Kelvin added he could only use 1 ability at a time and had to shift between them, effectively having 2 abilities active. Wrath noted many people had only 1 ability and could not choose it. Kelvin said he could activate or deactivate abilities and fuse similar ones at a cost of 10 game points. Wrath became excited about the possibilities, suggesting he could make Kelvin into S-God, the god of espers or supers. Kelvin asked who that was. Wrath explained it was a title, not a person. Kelvin dismissed the topic and asked if he could fuse stolen abilities with shapeshifting. He shook his head no. Wrath suggested making the first slot for hybridizing shapeshifting abilities to create a. Kelvin agreed, listing shapeshifting types like elasticity, inorganic transformation, species shifting, mechanical mimicry, and matter state shifting. Wrath interrupted, emphasizing metal bones and skin working with inorganic transformation, imagining Kelvin shifting into diamond and becoming invulnerable. Wrath expressed excitement and confidence in choosing Kelvin. Kelvin cautioned that their targets were at least F rank and not easy to reach. Wrath remained undeterred, saying they would get to them eventually and could use money to hire others to hunt abilities. Kelvin agreed, noting the importance of game points and regretting he could not use his game name for villain gigs. Wrath explained that using the game name would expose him to enemies and cause the Thunder Beast Villain League to betray him. Wrath advised relying on performance in the games. Kelvin smiled and mentioned he had a good idea for the next game but did not elaborate. Wrath focused on making Kelvin unkillable by acquiring abilities from other classes to cover all weaknesses. Wrath listed threats Kelvin needed immunity against, including freezing, burning, crushing, shooting, poisoning, mind control, illusions, psychic attacks, nulls, suffocation, being thrown into space, and nukes. Kelvin groaned as Wrath enumerated the dangers. Kelvin rolled his eyes and said he would eventually gain survivability against nukes upon reaching the X rank, as everyone did, so there was no need to rush. Wrath disagreed, stating they could not wait for natural empowerment because it would take too long. Wrath explained that resistance to radiation and the ability to escape a nuke was manageable at S rank, but surviving a close explosion required invulnerability, especially against multiple nukes. Kelvin laughed and questioned why he would need protection against 100 nukes. Wrath replied that it was better to have it and not need it than the reverse. Wrath recounted that nukes had been used against Icon multiple times, killing his family and weakening Icon enough to be killed. Wrath warned Kelvin not to think it couldn't happen to him and urged preparation for. Kelvin conceded and agreed to do everything possible to ensure survival but asked how he could achieve such power without being a demigod. Wrath insisted that aiming higher and seeking empowerment proactively was the way. Kelvin then asked what Wrath would gain from all this. Wrath fell silent before admitting a desire for freedom. Wrath explained being trapped in the ring, forced to change wielders every few years, unable to move freely or taste food, like a genie in a lamp granting wishes for random people. Wrath needed a demigod to free him. Kelvin empathized with the lack of freedom, having recently tasted it himself, but asked what a genie was. Wrath chuckled and said it was a powerful spirit from another world, forced to grant 3 wishes if captured, though it might be a myth. Kelvin expressed confidence they could make him a demigod without a genie's help and joked that if he failed, Wrath could try. Wrath laughed, and both grew optimistic as Kelvin received confirmation of his mission. Kelvin used half of his recently acquired money to post many missions seeking information about individuals with powerful abilities in New London, focusing on the young and vulnerable to capture them himself. himself. He wanted help finding unique, unranked abilities, hoping to acquire an Omega ability. He considered offering to steal people's abilities, as many viewed them as curses and might pay to be rid of them, but he refrained due to the large target on his back and powerful enemies seeking to kill him. Both he and Wrath agreed it was foolish to announce his second ability publicly, as a demigod spotting him extracting abilities would reveal its source. He decided to proceed cautiously. Next, Kelvin sought another mission to earn money and train himself, as absorbing abilities required game points. Wrath suggested practicing in real-life situations to learn how to combine his various abilities for different scenarios. Kelvin chose an easy, low-risk mission as a hired gun for a gang engaged in a gang war. The long-term mission would pay based on performance, allowed quitting any time, and would end when the war or employer ended. Kelvin smiled and said he could finally use his guns, including better ones. Kelvin pointed out to Wrath on the terminal that the employer would provide them with weapons. Wrath responded with a sour tone, questioning if Kelvin was not taking the mission to train his ability. Kelvin assured he could manage both. Wrath disapproved, stating that guns would soon become obsolete and only missiles, bombs, and nukes would matter in battles among the strong. Kelvin asked about weapon class supers. Wrath folded its shadowy arms and insisted he would not change his mind about guns until Kelvin obtained a weapon class ability. Kelvin ignored the comment and called Wrath a killjoy. Kelvin returned home briefly to pick new clothes and sleep, and he researched different types of abilities since he would soon be hunting for them. He reviewed the 6 general classes of supers: physique, psychic, null, amplify, weapons, and summoners. The physique class relied on their bodies, and the psychic class on their minds. These were the most popular classes. The least common were nulls, who weakened or nullified aspects of power using touch or proximity, and amplifiers, who did the opposite. Weapon class supers formed bonds with inorganic materials or equipment, enhancing them or being enhanced by them, and could communicate with and control various weapons. Summoners formed bonds with living beings, which could be symbiotic, dominating, or parasitic, ranging from ants to anteaters or. Kelvin already knew most of this information, but Wrath's occasional comments taught him new details, such as Icon being a weapons class and Raijin an amplify class. Kelvin found it odd that an amplifier class could defeat a weapon class super, known for their deadly combat capabilities. Wrath explained Icon's defeat was due to the Justice League, who used nukes against Icon without regard for the environment, and that amplifiers working in groups could overpower even the strongest man. Kelvin knew little about these events but was aware that Thunder Beast, leader of the Thunderstorm Villain League, was a powerful summoner of rats whose summons evolved to become deadly. Wrath was enlightened but unimpressed, stating anything controlling lightning could become powerful. Kelvin argued for Thunder Beast's achievement, noting he was once classified as a beta super but became strong enough to create a villain league. Wrath suggested watching Icon's fight and studying the history of the strongest man in history. Kelvin decided to watch Icon's matches in the Tower of Destiny, which updated his destiny report. The report listed his name, health, stamina, focus, class, tier, level, attributes, kill count, fans, game points, power rating, and abilities. He noticed he could remove the destiny he had just stolen at the. He contemplated the next mission with new insight, recognizing the value of his power-shifting ability. He had not decided to remove the ability yet, as Steel Bones was helpful and he planned to fuse it with something else, but he appreciated having options. Kelvin proceeded to watch Icon's last match, wanting to see Icon at his best. Icon, a short man, controlled thousands of robots exhibiting abilities from every class, including weapons, with some healing others and some wielding guns. Kelvin questioned what kind of ability allowed Icon to command such robots, thinking it was like power shifting but superior, as Icon could use all abilities at once. The match was between Icon and a single opponent, both level 99, but ended quickly due to Icon's overwhelming power. Kelvin returned to real life promptly to ask Wrath the question burning within him.